Hello and welcome to What Makes a Difference, and we are delighted to have Lobby Thornton on from Trojan Wellbeing.
Lovely to have you, Lobby. Thank you for joining us this morning.
No, you're welcome. It's great to be back. It seems only a short while ago we were having a chat about biscuits, but yeah.
Hours I could spend talking about biscuits.
Yeah.
What was the idea behind you setting up the Trojan Wellbeing, and how does it support police officers mostly?
Okay, well, yeah, Trojan Wellbeing came about when I was still serving with the Metropolitan Police. I'd actually retired from the police in 2013. I was on the Specialist Firearms Unit. Retired in 2013, disappeared off down to Devon for a couple of years as a beach bum. And then the Met decided, and I think they regret making this decision, they asked me to come back as a civilian firearms instructor. And being a civilian, it gives you a few more rights within the police. So I went back with a bit of a mission, because it was during the time one of my colleagues was being investigated for the Wood Green shooting, and a good friend of mine. And I could see the way he was being treated. I know it was impacting him and his family, and the welfare support being provided by the job was atrocious, really. So I started to put in place a number of wellbeing initiatives within the police. One of them included sort of mental health first aid training to increase sort of people's mental health literacy. Yoga introduced to firearms officers, which was a feat on its own, getting them through the door to do yoga. We actually changed the name, called it fitness yoga, which confused them a bit. So we got them through the door, but they really enjoyed the yoga side of things. But it was just all about providing that sort of point of contact. So if anyone was struggling, they had someone that they could go to, they could trust, and speak about what's going on, because certainly within the police, and I know it's very similar in the military, it's a very sort of macho environment, and people are very reluctant to talk about their mental health. So that all led on to sort of actually creating Trojan Wellbeing. And the beauty of Trojan Wellbeing is that it's independent from the police. So again, this sort of, colleagues were concerned about sort of the confidentiality being breached, or information being used to sort of like prevent them progressing in their career, or even removing them from a specialist unit. When you talk about firearms, you start talking about mental health. The environment then was that if you stuck your hand up and said, I'm really struggling with my mental health, your firearms authority was removed, or you were taken off ops, and it could be 6 months before you're back on ops. So, of course, colleagues would be reluctant to talk about their mental health. So by providing Trojan Wellbeing, which was separate, we had colleagues reaching out for support, knowing that they were secure in the knowledge that that information wasn't going to be used against them. So we could actually provide support for them. And that was back in 2020. So we're now sort of 4 years old now, and the group has just exploded. We've provided the peer support, as you well know, and not only to police now, because when you talk about sort of the blue light community, we've got paramedics, firefighters, they've all become involved with the group. And we also deal with military, both serving and veterans, because it's very sort of similar sort of experiences people have, and we're very similar in the way we deal with things as well. So that's that camaraderie and that peer support within those sort of environments. So that was basically why Trojan Wellbeing was initially set up. Bit of a politician's answer, but
But I think a lot of people don't realise that organisations like the armed forces, like some of the blue light services, particularly police force, they have a full set of internal rules and regulations which take them outside of the normal statutory governance, so that sometimes what you as a civilian would assume would be appropriate, or would be something that you would take maybe to a tribunal, or you would raise in a certain way, doesn't happen or isn't conducted in the same way either in the police force or the armed forces, because it's almost like a separate structure and a separate set of rules that govern that. And that can have quite a big impact on people because of those differences.
Oh, definitely. And none more so when you actually leave the police service or the military, and you transition into sort of like the civilian world. I mean, because, we're used to sort of being in a disciplined environment. We're used to structure to our sort of day as well, even though, policing, it was, you could go into work, you don't know what you're going to deal with. We still had some form of structure and governance around that. So when you move into Civvy Street, or you lose your identity, you lose that structure, and you lose that peer support of like-minded people around you. So that is really difficult for some people to sort of, get used to, and some people really struggle with that.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we said that what makes a difference was to deal with all that identity and how for people to move forward from there. Because it's a huge problem for a lot of people, where some people have a very, very smooth transition, but maybe 7-8 years later, that'll catch up with them and go, who am I now?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And it was something that I really took for granted. I mean, I was, when I came to the end of my 30-year service, when I originally retired from the police, I mean, I was ready to leave. I knew it was the right time to leave. But what I didn't anticipate was how it would impact me, mentally sort of leaving. If you were to speak to my wife, I was a proper pain in the ass to be around. The lead up to the retirement and when I retired as well. I mean, I thought I was coping okay. There's a couple of sort of moments that sort of really sort of brought it on to me that, in Civvy Street. And I think one of them, I was studying in a pub down in Devon where we'd actually moved to in Tinman. I was stood in the pub just talking to a teacher. And of course, they want to know about, all the gory details about, when you were in the police, the usual question, did you shoot anyone? You think, okay. But I was just chatting about, one day we were dealing with a 14-year-old who'd been shot, and our ambulance turned up, and they cut his chest on, and I'm saying, I'm just stood there sort of assisting the paramedics and whatever, the doctor, the HEMS doctor's working on the poor kid, massaging his heart. And I'm just going through it as though it's just another. And I just looked at this guy. He's just looking at me as though I just landed from another planet. And he said, seriously? I said, yeah. I said, that happened virtually on a daily basis, because we were patrolling sort of, the rough parts of London, not the glamorous bits, and and that was a daily account, with the knifings, the stabbings, and it was just, you came across it. You just get used to it, don't it? It's like that compassion fatigue, I suppose. And I came across this when I was working with the NHS. You talk to the nurses and doctors, and they're just numb to sort of what's going on around them. And that's another massive warning sign as well. I think that brought it on to me as well. That I thought, well, he's reacted like that, but it's not really had any impact on me. So is there something wrong with me? So you start to sort of think about what's going on with your own life.
Well, I think there's a number of things going on there. One is that if something is so common and so prevalent in your life, you normalize it.
Mm.
But there's also an element where that's your brain's safety mechanisms kicking in, because otherwise, how would you deal with that on a day-by-day basis?
Yeah.
In a way, you have to become almost immune to that to be able to do that day in, day out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're in constant overwhelm with it. You'd burn out in seconds.
Yeah, and what I didn't realise, because obviously, having gone down the route of sort of doing the mental health, I think doing the mental health first aid training opened up my eyes to what was going on then, and I've since gone on, and done more work around that. I've done the trauma risk management courses, all that trauma informed sort of support. And what I failed to realise is that, even though we were dealing with all this stuff and, we're saying it didn't really impact me, the body was keeping score.
Mm-hmm.
It was logging all that stuff. And when I deal with colleagues who've got complex PTSD or certainly showing the signs, it's like, their lockers finally is full now. And something comes along, and it can be something quite innocent that comes along, a death of a dog or just seeing, an incident, and it just tips them over. It tips them over the edge. And when they explain to you, I was dealing with this incident, you'd think, well, that's a pretty straightforward incident. Why has it caused him why has he had such an adverse reaction to it?
Yeah.
But it's just understanding that the stress container's overflowed.
Yeah. Well, it's also that timeline, isn't it? So you've got your time going across and you witnessed everything that's going on with that. And then that final bit leads back to that start point, and everything just comes into one, and it just like blows up in the mind, as it were.
Yeah. It's like your brain saying, right, okay, now we've had this, you can deal with all this stuff at the same time now. get all this sort of result, because I've been struggling to put it in its right place in the brain.
Well,
you can
it's like,
with this.
And the whole system then is overwhelmed, isn't it? It's like a riverbank that gets flooded.
Yeah.
The system is just gone. It can't cope with the whole situation that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was like, I knew when I had a problem, it was just a simple task. I mean, I think one time I was just at the cash point, trying to get money out, and the PIN number that I use, I'd had with me sort of like forever. It was like, any sort of cyber hackers out there, it'd be very easy to sort of, break down my bank accounts and whatever you can. So I was still at this cash point trying to put in my PIN number that I've been using like forever. I thought, what's going on here? Then I realised I was putting in my shoulder number. And I'm thinking, why? And it's just like simple things. And you have a bit of a sort of, not a meltdown, but you just think, oh, Christ, what's going on here? I can't even do the simple stuff.
Well, it's a bit like, I sometimes refer to that as the pint of spilt milk. It's like you can cope with the big stuff, but it's the pint of milk that breaks it. Yeah. Because that's the part that almost is too simple, that should be okay. And the fact that now it also isn't is just the tipping point. It's just the one bit that's just too much. Rich and I were having a really interesting conversation yesterday, which I think is also pertinent to what you're saying, Lobby. And that was the conversation Rich, you and I were having about stigma. And the fact that sometimes, because what strikes me is that it's the difficulty in coming forward and saying, this isn't right. Because that normalization is also numbing. And that numbing isn't selective. So that means that you're numb to everything more often than not just one thing. That impacts on all of your relationships. But when you come forward, there's that challenge then of, what does it mean for my job? What does it mean for the other people around about me? And then there's the risk of, does that mean that I now have this label attached to me? That means everything that I do thereafter is looked at through the lens of this label. So that no matter what I do, there will be an element of that label, whether it applies or not, that will be considered before you hear what I say. And that's the issue sometimes with stigma, is how long will I carry that label for? And who will put it on me, and how will it influence their behaviours towards me thereafter? Because what you want in those situations is for everybody to be really normal round about you.
Yeah.
You don't want almost that kind of, well, it's because you don't want people to treat you like you're broken. You want people to listen. You want people to have a conversation with you. But you also want them to recognise that this is now, it's not forever, and I can move beyond this.
Yeah. I mean, I had a number of, I wouldn't say a heated conversation, but debates with quite senior officers. And one guy in particular, he was the commander in charge of the royalty and royalty protection. So the guys who stand outside Buckingham Palace and all the close protection guys. So he was in charge of all that. And he was saying that if anyone comes to him and said about sort of stress and whatever, then, I'm going to be removing their card and we'll give them support. I said, well, is that the right way to deal with this? I said, because stress comes in many different forms. So you might have someone just going through a bit of a traumatic time, or whether it's sort of a divorce or going through some sort of breakup. I said they might just need a week or two reflection, just being given some space. I said, and then they will come back and deal with it. At the end of the day, they're adults. And by you saying you're going to take someone's firearms authority off them, you're putting that sort of barrier that people won't come forward because they know what the consequences are. And I used to sort of demonstrate this as well, because I used to do the training for these guys when they used to come down to the training centre. And I run a couple of stress awareness lessons. And I would ask people, say, how many people have broken bones and been sort of assaulted in sort of fights and whatever? You get loads of hands going up. Yeah, I broke my foot, broke my hand, all that sort of stuff. I said, okay. I said, how many people have been off sick with stress then? Well, tumbleweed, So then I did a mental fitness screening test, which was based around the PTSD questionnaire that was put out by the Canadians, and there's a couple of them. There's the military one, the one for the civilian. So I adopted it for the police, but I didn't tell them it was a PTSD questionnaire because already people start. I'm not going to fill this out because. So I just said, this is a lifestyle questionnaire. So I did this questionnaire. It was over a 3-month training cycle we did, and started to do this questionnaire, and they were filling it all out. And I said, I know what's going to happen here. I said, you're going to do one score that you're going to write on the paper. I said, but mentally it's going to be your accurate score. I said, that's fine, and I understand that. I said, so if there's any sort of concerns at the end of this input and you want to have a chat, then come and see me and we'll have a confidential chat. So I started to do these questionnaires, and I don't know if you know the actual questionnaire. It's like, if you score above, I think it was 35 and above, you had like a 40% chance of developing PTSD.
Yeah.
And then there was sort of different sort of grades, low, medium, high risk. So we started to do the questionnaire, and quite a few people were surprised by their score because they didn't realise how stressed they were. And when you sort of finish the lesson, I want to traipse out, 24 coppers and walk out, and then you get a couple just hanging back. And they come up to say, I scored quite high with that. I was like 50 odd. I said, okay. So bearing in mind, we had 1,500 authorised firearms officers we were training. We were halfway through the training cycle. And so we'd done about 800 officers, and we'd already signposted 20 officers for immediate sort of counselling therapy because they'd scored off the chart, and they were really in quite a vulnerable place. And you can probably double that number of the officers who were concerned about their score. So, we provided support and gave them sort of lifestyle changes they could do, because a lot of them were just working and not really giving themselves any self-care. So I went to my boss with this. I said, boss, I've got a few concerns, doing this sort of stress awareness input. I said, I've already identified 20 who needed immediate support. I said, and double that number we're providing support for. I said, it's just raised some real concerns about, these guys and girls are out in the streets of London carrying a loaded firearm and they're in this situation. So his response was, stop doing the questionnaire. I said, but what about the other sort of guys who are going to become on the train and who we've still not spoken to? He said, it's not your responsibility. I thought, well, as a firearms instructor, it is my responsibility that anyone carrying a firearm on the streets of London is both physically and mentally capable of doing that. And if not, we need to provide that support. So again, one of the reasons why Trojan Wellbeing was set up. When you talk about that stigma, that came from the organisation who was saying, we're here to sort of look after our colleagues. But when you told them this was a problem, they just reverted back to mental health.
Yeah. I was chatting to some guys from, I think it was Bedfordshire Fire Brigade, and they set up a wellbeing in one of the fire stations, mental wellbeing day. So they all parked their cars outside the station, and somebody had sent some of the senior commanders of that fire brigade around to check on the VRNs of who had attended that. So it goes on, which is really quite sad.
Yeah.
And so you've got that firearms officer. He's been then excluded or taken away from that role in that position. That's also him being that firearms officer being isolated.
Yeah.
That stigma surrounding that person, that does them no good because they're not having that contact with their peer group who may be able to help them through that situation as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said that this is a beauty of Trojan Wellbeing. We've set up these peer support groups. I knew chatting to colleagues and whatever was very beneficial for someone's mental health, but I didn't fully appreciate how beneficial it could be. And, it is a lifesaver, and it's been a lifesaver for a number of colleagues, and I've had messages saying, I'm so glad I found Trojan Wellbeing, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And, all we've done is just given them a platform to talk to other people. And we've not even signposted them to professionals. Those that have identified that they do need help. We've got the professionals, people like yourself and other sort of colleagues who come from that sort of background, who understand, the role as well in relation to, the trauma and whatever. It really makes a massive difference. And I think, that's built up our credibility as Trojan Wellbeing. We actually do provide appropriate support, because what we're finding with the employment assistance programs is colleagues are being signposted or referred through to counsellors and therapists. So, I mean, some of the counsellors have just come out of university. Mm-hmm. We had one counsellor down in Hampshire who actually put in a complaint against the officer, to the officer's supervisor, because she was traumatised with what he was telling her, because he used to work on the sort of child sex exploitation unit. So he was going through what he'd experienced, and it traumatised her. And she actually complained to his sergeant saying, I've been traumatised by this, there was no sort of warning. And you're thinking, well, if you're going to be involved in that environment, then guess what? It's not pretty, Some
people are very naive.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for that person, because the organisation put her in that position. They've exposed her to that trauma, which again, you've got to question what's going on. This is just a tick box. We gave the officer counselling, but that officer didn't respond to the counselling because there was no connection, and it actually caused more damage than resolved.
Well, I think I would agree with you, Lobby, in that's the organisation's fault, because there is a responsibility when you're bringing people in. So, for instance, whether that's the work that Rich and I do or you do, that when you're bringing somebody in to work with you to support your client base, the people that you have coming to you for help, there's an element where part of our responsibility is also to handhold with the people that are new to that organisation, to our organisations, to go, right, let's be very clear in how we start you off on this, so that you have a chance to build your awareness, to build your comfort zone, to build your understanding of this, so that this isn't traumatic for you, because this is the situation. So we get to know you as well and know what your capacity is for this too. But there's also that part where underneath that is the support for those individuals doing that work, which is critical. Is as much about supporting them to make sure that they're okay, because it can be tough. It can be really tough. You can hear some really, really hard stuff, but that stuff sometimes needs to come out.
Yeah.
You need to be able to find somebody you can trust to have that conversation with. I mean, Rich and I are fortunate in that the way we work tends to be largely content-free, which means that we don't ever do the whole, well, tell me everything that happened on X date from start to finish in as much detail as you possibly can. We're never going to ask you that. Never. We don't need to. But that doesn't mean to say that we don't sometimes get situations where somebody still has the need to say, I need to speak this out loud. And you go, right, okay.
Yeah.
I'm your safe ears. But that's also the beauty of the peer group. I think that's very much the similar across blue light or, for instance, the armed services, is knowing that there's a certain level of understanding that you don't have to explain.
Yeah.
It's the familiarity that makes it easier, much easier.
Yeah. And it's also, in a way, normalizing it, because when you're going through that, you think, is it me? Is it me just not being able to cope with it all? And you're conditioned to think, I'm weak because I can't deal with this. But when you start talking to other people and you realize, they're going through similar stuff, you think, well, it's quite normal.
Yeah.
In a strange way, it's quite, normalizing those reactions, something obviously we do with the trauma-informed stuff, it's quite normal to have these reactions. It's nothing wrong. It's just your body doing what it's meant to be doing. And that makes a massive difference, because, when you're going through it, you think, I'm broken. There's nothing people can do to help me. So it's a major step for someone to actually realize that, you know what, you're okay. This is quite normal.
Yeah. So most of the people, I'm guessing, in the peer support I'll use this in quotes, average police officer on the beat kind of thing?
Yeah, well, so it started off that. I mean, it actually started off as being firearms officers, because that was my environment. So how sort of Trojan Wellbeing came about was I actually did a mental health first aid course. I had 12 people on it from the firearms unit. Obviously, we all got chatting and we made connections during the course. People sort of shared some quite sort of important stuff, and made that connection. So it was a massive bond. So those 12 people were really the nucleus for the start of the peer support.
Yeah.
But it's just grown from that now.
Yeah. So where I was going with this is it's not just affecting the average officer on the beat or the average firearms officer, as it were. It's also affecting senior officers as well. It's got to. All this stress, all these other things. And they're not acknowledging that, or they don't want to. Could be a case of do they bury their head in the sand and just ignore it all? And then what's going to happen? Potentially more serious incidents.
Yeah. I mean, there's a fantastic sort of guy out there, John Sutherland. I don't know if you ever seen any of his work, but he used to be a police commander within the Met. He's done a number of books now, and he speaks about that pressure where it's a very lonely place as a senior officer, and obviously the pressures on him that he couldn't sort of say he couldn't deal with the pressure or anything like that, because that would have blighted his career, because that's the way the organisation looked at it and viewed mental health. So he's done some fantastic books around it. He does a public speaking as well. So we're very much aware of that it goes all the way up. No one's immune to it.
No.
At the end of the day, but what we have discovered is that it's not just the officer; it's their family.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's their family that are sat at home, watching their loved one go out the door, not knowing whether they're going to come back in. So that pressure. And also, I mean, I was chatting to one former police officer, and this completely destroyed him, really, when his daughter said to him one time, said, Dad, when you used to come on and we had the key going in the lock, we also used to run upstairs and pretend to be asleep because we didn't know whether it was angry Dad coming through the door or nice Dad. And he said that just completely devastated him. He didn't realise the impact he was having on his family. So now, we include, when we talk about blue light community, that's what we mean, the families, because at the end of the day, they're the unsung heroes.
Yeah.
But if they're not right, then that has an impact on the officer, because, they're, the officers are concerned about their families. So you've got to look after the families as well. And we're even looking at how it impacts children, so we've got specially trained sort of, counsellors who can deal with childhood trauma. And we all know when we start to sort of, chip away at what's going on and start uncovering all the trauma, it goes back to our childhood. There's a lot of incidents.
This is exactly why we set up What Makes a Difference as well, Lobby, is to do that whole family unit, because within the military community, when they leave, that's all missing. It's looked after that service leaver, look after the veteran, but where's the family involved in all of this? It's not.
Yeah. They're
kind of in that grey space of, well, I kind of served. I was in, but I never served. So who am I? What's my identity? What's my boundaries and all that kind of stuff? And that's what's missing, that comprehensive wraparound support from leaving the forces or leaving the blue light services into civilian life.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is very rightly, is that while the serving individual is in either the forces or the blue light community, it's the impact, as you say, on the family, on the partner, on the children, on brothers and sisters, on mums and dads, who are on the outskirts of observing that, and they might not necessarily have the language to understand because their family member, their loved one, is part of a separate community as well as their community. Different experiences that they might not be able to relate to. And that then means that sometimes people in a family unit, for instance, quite often what we will see is almost the distancing from the family unit, which is a protective mechanism, because you don't want to inflict your experiences and what you're going through on them, because your role is to protect them too.
Yeah.
But actually what that experience then is it breaks relationships. It means that the children feel as though they don't have a relationship with a parent. That leads to all sorts of different issues in terms of how they learn. to have relationships because we model from our parents, from those around us, from the relationships we observe. And then that has a generational impact. It impacts on how you learn to solve problems, how you learn to talk about your emotions. It ripples forward. And if you don't support that unit, then you have no chance of actually trying to resolve that and putting the right support in to make sure those ripples don't happen.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Rich.
Yeah, that's also about retention. So you've got all these highly trained members of staff, officers, and they're going, well, what's the point of being here if I'm not being looked after and cared for? You're losing very, very good people who want to do that job.
Yeah. I mean, I was invited down to Downing Street to speak to one of the senior advisors. I mean, fortunately, he was a former police officer himself, so we had that connection. And this was all about how can we sort of improve the recruitment for the police. We need to do more stuff to get more recruits coming in. I said, well, what you need to do, I said, you need to start looking after the experienced officers in there because they're the ones that nurture the new ones coming in. I said, if you're not looking after them, you're going to lose more people that are coming in. And, I know we are. I think the Met lost about 600 officers between sort of December and February, and they recruited 6. Mm-hmm. So you're thinking, well, if you don't, I think Richard Branson sort of says, doesn't he? He says, you look after your employees, and they will look after business for you. And this is the mess. We talk about all this, building trust with the public. Well, you've got to get your officers in a good place, look after them, and guess what? They will build that trust with the public. It's all right, them keep doing all this stuff, but if you're not looking after the well-being and the mental health of your colleagues, then they're going to be going out in the streets in a pretty bad place. So. It's just changing about. It's making it's that awareness, and we talk about this mental health literacy, just making people aware. And I tried to get this out to the senior officers because they still have this sort of thing. If someone's putting their hand up for sort of mental health and stress, that's it. We've got to remove them from us. I said I would much rather work with someone who's doing that than someone who's not saying anything. I said, because they're just a ticking time bomb. I said, at least this person's got the courage to come forward and actually seek some help and get themselves in a better place. I said, would you work with someone who's got high blood pressure who's taking tablets? Yeah. So why is that any different? Why, how many people are out there who are not taking tablets for high blood pressure who could collapse at any moment? Yeah. It's just that getting them sort of thinking along those lines. But,
It is. And if you've got an officer who's out on the street, they're highly stressed, in a bad mental state, they're not going to have a very good decision-making process. Everybody's a potential enemy. Everybody's a potential target. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that Batari's box, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I think the other thing is that recruitment challenge, isn't it? And the number of businesses I've had where our benchmark for how well we were doing was how effective our friends and family referral system for vacancies was. Mm. Yeah. And if that was really good to the extent that we didn't have to go external, then we knew we were like, we've got it right. The minute that dropped off, we're like, okay, what's going on? That means people aren't happy because they're not recommending you. They're not saying, actually, no, it's a really good place to work. Take care of you, they look after you, they support you. And your ticking time bombs are experiencing that because what they won't do is refer that on because they won't want anybody else to experience that either.
Yeah.
But actually, as you rightly say, your safest place to be is when somebody feels capable of saying, oof, I need a bit of help with resolving that. And the more open that culture is, the faster you get to put that solution in, the faster you get that safety net there. And that means as a whole, the entire organisation becomes healthier. Because it should be so freely talked about that it's almost like second nature for people to go, that was a tough experience for you. Let's have a sit down and chat about it. How did that go? How are you? Are you okay? And you have that freedom to have that conversation because that's self-healing within the organisation then.
Yeah, and it makes people feel valued as well when they're being listened to. I mean, I remember, again, this is probably my demise in the Metropolitan Police, but I had a conversation with a senior officer, and I said, for decades, colleagues were saying, we haven't got enough people out in the streets, we're overworked, we've got no places to go and eat, no canteens, and they weren't listened to. So the police paid hundreds of thousands for a survey to be done, for a study to be done by some, lecturers from some university somewhere. They come back after sort of months and months of doing all this research and said to the senior officers, your problem is that there's not enough people on the streets and they haven't got any places to go and eat. I said, we've been telling you that for the last 20 years. I said, we could have saved you that £600,000 that you've just spent for these couple of people to go around chatting to people. You just got to start listening to your people, and it's valuing what people are saying. You may not agree with what's being said, but you're valuing it. It's those active listening skills, and that's what it's all about. Because for the first time, these people feel as though they're being listened to.
Well, in business, they know it used to be for every £1 spent on well-being, valuing the officer, valuing the people in a business, they get £5 back in return.
Yeah. That was Deloitte, wasn't it, who did that? Yeah.
Would you mind talking a bit about how your bariatric chamber and all that really helps with?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. So one of the services, professional services we offer is hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and I was actually introduced this by an ex-sapper, actually, Royal Engineer, who was in a wheelchair. He's one of the sort of like team managers for Team Brit, who are like the go-karting, karting sort of team, but they're also linked to British touring car thing. So they get disabled sort of veterans and whatever back into sort of like racing sport. So I started chatting to him about, getting Trojan Wellbeing involved with that, activities and stuff. And he said, he uses this chamber, to help with his sort of, disability, and how it really he said it helps my mental health as well. So I thought, that's interesting, because, we're always looking at sort of different ways of helping people with PTSD and complex PTSD and whatever. So he gave me a few links, and it led me to a couple of studies in the States where they've been using this for the sort of Navy SEALs and military veterans out there for complex PTSD, and they've been getting some fantastic results. So the more and more I looked into it, I found out that, professional sports people use it for injuries and whatever. Ronaldo's got his own chamber, so that's why he looks as good as he does. I mean, I've been using it, and I'm waiting for that transformation, into sort of Ronaldo. But he uses it to sort of maintain his fitness. When you think him and, I can't remember the name, the manager from Derby County, Wayne Rooney, both the same age. But if you look at Wayne Rooney comparing to Ronaldo,
I was going to say Michael Jackson with his oxygen tent.
Michael Jackson used to sleep in one overnight. Justin Bieber uses one. So I thought there's got to be something to this. So we looked into it, and we could see the benefits. So we thought, there's only one way to find out. So we actually got hold of a chamber, and we set up our own clinic. So we've been using it for the mental health side of things, and then we discovered there's other benefits that you get from it. People who've got sort of fibromyalgia, helps with the sort of fatigue levels. People who've got sort of heart disease, helps improve circulation, improves the oxygen flow to the brain, and there's the benefits are unbelievable. We had one. Well, she's 80-year-old now. She came to us. She'd had shingles for about 4 years, and certain clothing she couldn't wear because it's so painful. And she started using the chamber. So it's not only was she able to sort of wear the clothing, her feet shrunk because she had bunions on her feet. She was able to wear shoes. So again, stuff we didn't realise. So that's been phenomenal, and that's a bit of a slow burner. We're trying to get people involved in it. But yeah, so hyperbaric it's been a bit of a revelation, and we're just trying to get a bit more interest around it, because there's still this sort of resistance to the use of it. But it's getting, the England rugby team use it for their players, so it's got to be good.
That's going to be an ambassador, Lobby.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to get to, because I'm actually linked in with a charity called Rugby for Heroes, and one of the patrons is Mike Tyndall. So we're trying to get sort of a couple of people interested, just to sort of be an ambassador for it. But yeah, it's again, that's on my to-do list after I've done the logo behind me, Ali. So got a couple of things on the list.
We'll get that sorted for you, Lobby. Don't you worry. You just send me the stuff, I'll get that sorted for you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because obviously there's an expense to your chamber as well, isn't there?
Yeah. So one of the things we tried to do. So one of the guys who we rented a chamber to is an ex-Royal Signals guy. He had a traumatic brain injury about 20 odd years ago. Really sort of struggled with his sleep. I think he's averaged about 4 hours sleep for the past 20 odd years. So that really impacted him. So got him into the chamber, and it's improved his sleep by about 95%. And he's one of our greatest ambassadors for it. Another guy we got in the chamber was an ex-Royal Marine Reserve, ex-GMP lad, who tried to cut his arm off with a chainsaw doing some tree surgery. So we helped him sort of repair the damage to his arm. So they've both used it. But yeah, it comes at a cost. So we've looked at different sort of funding. We approached the charities. The charities wouldn't sort of support us because hyperbaric isn't on the NICE guidelines at the moment.
Yeah.
So we really struggled for that. So we had to do a lot of self-funding, set up a GoFundMe page. And more recently, what we've discovered, and this is our latest project, we've gone into sort of a bit of a collaboration with Utility Warehouse. So a lot of our colleagues who come to us are struggling financially. So, we can help them reduce household bills. An average was saving about £600-700 a year for them. Actually, one colleague last night I was speaking to, it was £2,000 that we were able to save her. So that's a holiday paid for. But the beauty of this collaboration is that obviously anyone who signs up, Trojan Wellbeing get the commission for signing a customer. So over the last 2 weeks, we've generated £2,000 in funding, which is awesome. So that's gone towards a cost providing the chambers. It cost us £15,000 for the chambers, so we're repaying that. We're also looking at funding workshops, which would be of interest to you, because we're going to get guest speakers down there to do the inputs, because the way the workshops are formatted, we get people to do the group discussion bit, and then we get guest speakers to come along and give them sort of a bit more of awareness and coping mechanisms within for them to use to help them get through that period. So that's our next project, is a workshop. And then we're looking at setting up our very first sort of veterans hub. I say veterans hub, it's going to be on to blue light, sort of, military and NHS. So we're looking at funding a veterans hub purely through people switching their energy across the Trojan Wellbeing and saving money. So we're very excited about that project, and no doubt you'll see a bit of it coming across the social media platforms with people. Yeah. So, we're always looking at ways. I mean, we're in the process of becoming a charity as well. I think we're on our 4th application, which is very frustrating, but it's a very lengthy process. I think once we get accepted, it's another 18-week period before you get the charity status, which will then open up the doors to sort of, get more funding and grants, so we can actually fund more events around the country, which would be fantastic. We've got so many things planned, but we just need that sort of, funding to do that.
You'll have a whole backroom staff lobby.
Well, as I say, we are looking at sort of, recruiting people on board. It'd be nice to sort of, we don't expect people to give up their time for free, because it is, once you get involved in Trojan Wellbeing, it does consume you. And, I've had to sort of, impose some boundaries on, I say I've had to, my wife's imposed some boundaries on me in relation to Trojan Wellbeing, because it can be 24/7 if you let it take over. But the rewards are, you're speaking to people who are saying, if I hadn't heard about Trojan Wellbeing, I wouldn't be here. So that's fantastic. And you talk about recruitment, Ali. I mean, Trojan Wellbeing is growing only because it's word of mouth. People are saying, if you want help, go to Trojan Wellbeing, and they will help you. And because
one of the biggest draws as well, Lobby, is there's no judgment on what people are coming to you with either.
No. Because we all know that there's more going on beyond everyone's carrying that sort of rucksack on the back with the rocks in, aren't they? They've all got their own sort of stories to tell. So yeah, what they might be telling you to the face isn't the actual true story of what's going on. And this is something I try and get across to my colleagues when they're chatting to other colleagues and dismissing them. We've had colleagues approach and say, "Oh yeah, I'm really stressed because they changed my shift from a late turn to early turn." And you get the usual, "Oh God, well, you signed up, that's what you're going to get." But when you actually dig deep, you realise that because they've changed that shift, that person is now either missing a child's birthday, or they can't go and visit the mum in hospital. There's other things going on, and you just got to take a step back, haven't you, sometimes think.
Well, as we mentioned beforehand, it's typical British kind of attitude is, "How you doing today? I'm all right," and that's good enough, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think sometimes that initial approach also is almost like it's like Regina talked about, like that whole kind of risk and dare, and you risk assess things before you commit, don't you? So that's part of the risk assessment, isn't it? Is I'll try this because this intro is safe. I'll see what you respond to and how you respond with that. And then if I trust your response, I might give you a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And the knack with that is being patient enough to go, okay, so talk to me about that.
Yeah.
What else is there? What? How? It's being aware enough to open the door and go, if you want to walk through it, I'm here.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned previously, one of our talks as well, Lobby, is one of the senior officers you're talking to goes, "Yeah, I've got an open door policy, but have you actually gone out and talked to people in the office, out in the street, and find out what they're actually experiencing?"
Yeah. I mean, I was criticised by my senior management team when I was down at the Firearms Training Centre because so many people were coming to me for support. And I said, and they were saying to me, "Oh, you've got to start sending them to other people." I said, "No, because at the end of the day, that person has made that conscious decision that I'm going to go and speak to Lobby because I trust him." So they had made that decision, built themselves up to it. They go and speak to Lobby. He goes, "Yeah, go and speak to Tom. I'm a bit too busy." That person will never speak to Tom and will never speak to anyone else because, they've taken that time to sort of come and reach out for someone. Well, and I used to say to the boss, and the reason why people are approaching me is because I'm going round and saying, "Hello, Robin, how you doing, mate? How's your missus got she had a bit of a tumble the other day." And when you tell his supervisor, "Have you looked after Robin because his missus isn't well?" He goes, "Oh, I wasn't aware of that." Why are you not aware of what's going on with the people around you? It's just asking questions. And as you quite rightly said, Ali, it's that, "How you doing, mate?" And they say, "Yeah, I'm okay." "No, how are you doing?" Because
it's just killing it off, basically.
And I think the interesting response from an organisation who is paying attention would have been, why are they coming to you, not everybody else? What are you doing differently that makes you the person that they feel safe to talk to? Because I need to find out so that I can start doing it too.
Yeah. They actually banned me at one stage of offering welfare support to any officer. And you just think, well, therein lies a problem.
Oh, a big problem. A big problem. Mm-hmm.
Have you got any takeaways or you could give our listeners?
Just that support is out there, and don't be frightened to reach out for support because, as you quite rightly said, you're not going to get judged. I mean, we all fear about being judged, don't we? That's the big sort of barrier for people reaching out for support. And you start talking to people, you'll be surprised how many people are in that same boat with you going through that storm. And, by talking to, just chat to other people is going to help. I'm not saying that, you're going to need counselling or therapy because sometimes sitting down, having a brew with someone is the best therapy you'll ever have, But if we do need that extra leg up, then we've got the people in place to do that, So it's, it's fantastic. And, every day, I see people on the groups and, and we are... as I say, making a difference for people, and that's why we do what we do.
Ali, any takeaways?
Just I suppose to remind everybody that we will put all the contact details for Trojan Wellbeing in the show notes. It will be there, and if anything we're saying is resonating, please do reach out to us or to Lobby. There are people there that will listen, that will have the door open and will welcome you through it. And the worst place to be is on the wrong side of that, not knowing who to talk to, because there are people there you can have those conversations with. And that's important. That's really important.
Yeah. But I would say it's not tick box exercise. The senior officers, they have to start taking a lead and start leading by example. Not necessarily having to open up to the junior police officers or whomever they're dealing with, but start being open and honest with how the police officers and police staff are being treated. Because it's not just them, as you said, Lobby, it's the families as well and the whole community at large that they are responsible for.
Yeah. I mean, my view on it, it's a ground-up approach, which, to be honest, and it's quite easy to point your finger at the senior officer saying you should be doing more, but really we should be looking at ourselves. What can I be doing to help my colleague?
I agree.
And start sort of supporting people, and you like to think this is the eternal optimist. I mean that will start to sort of filter its way up, because we've got to start looking after people at the ground level first.
Absolutely. But if they're putting the barriers up in first place, then they have to look at themselves and start making those changes for the benefit of not only themselves, the other rank and file of the police and above.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Lobby. Really do.
We wish you a very good day, and no doubt we shall be having lots of conversations with you. So take care and thank you.
I look forward to it, and we'll get you at these workshops as well. It'll be fantastic to for that support to be pushed out to the other guys and girls that were involved in Trojan, and new people coming to Trojan.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.